Hello, everyone. You're listening to Season 2 of the award-winning podcast, The Social Contract. I'm Tavia.
I'm George.
I'm CLEO.
And I'm Maya. Welcome to this episode of The Social Contract, the new way to Saturday.
Happy holidays, everyone, and welcome to the finale of Season 2 of The Social Contract. It has flown by, and I hope you've enjoyed our time together as much as we have. Now, for our big announcement. I'm thrilled to report that The Social Contract will be returning for a third season in 2024. We are so excited. I cannot wait to see and hear what George Corey and the artist CLEO have in store for our pint-sized protagonists, Georgie and GiGi, in Season 3. One thing's for sure, expect the unexpected. Remember to keep an eye out for updates and premiere info on mytscpodcast.com, as well as georgescorey.com and theartistcleo.com. Now let's kick things off with Maya, who has a couple of very fun multiple-choice questions about President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris.
Before he became vice president, Biden was a United States Senator from which state? A. Pennsylvania, B. Maryland, or C. Delaware? The answer is C. Delaware. Before she was selected to be Biden's VP, Kamala Harris was a United States Senator. What state was she from? A. California, B. Arizona, or C. New York? The answer is A. California.
Very good, Maya. Now, this episode is the first to give equal time to a president and vice president together, with good reason. In early 2021, just a short while after the inauguration, the current administration announced that it would officially be referred to not as the Biden administration, but as the Biden-Harris administration. Then Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters that the White House website and social media accounts would refer to the Biden-Harris administration to underscore the vice president's important role. When asked about it, Psaki explained that the message to be taken from the rebranding of the Biden administration to the Biden-Harris administration was this. She said, "I would take from it that Vice President Harris is an important partner. She's the first in the room and the last in the room on most occasions if she's in town." She then added that it was a reflection of the important role Vice President Harris would play moving forward. Now, before we get into Georgie and GiGi's encounter with President Biden and Vice President Harris, here is part 2 of my conversation with our very own George and CLEO. Happy holidays, George and CLEO. Congratulations on the just-announced Season 3 of the podcast. I am so happy that The Social Contract is coming back. Can you give our listeners just a little hint of what we can expect when Georgie and GiGi return in 2024, which also is an election year?
Yes, sure. It's really special because we get to reach many more people, and especially if they're in upper grade school or middle school, is the reason we wrote these books. So in the next year of Georgie and GiGi, they have this new pair of kids from New Orleans, brother and sister, who are joining them. They're all in the kayaks on the Potomac, the big river that goes through Washington, D.C., and they find themselves transported back to the time period when Thomas Jefferson was buying Louisiana. And we had a very funny episode at the Supreme Court where they get to learn all about the Supreme Court and get to learn about the Supreme Court members and see them, all of them all dressed up, and then also very, very friendly behind the scenes.
I love it. George, as we'll hear soon in the finale, this episode is really different than the other episodes. First of all, it's very much set in the present. So Georgie and GiGi aren't flying through the sky, traveling back in time on their magical skateboard. They actually visit the current White House and they come face to face with our chief executive. And it's also the first episode in which the president and vice president get equal billing. So I'm wondering if it was a conscious choice to end the story in the season of the podcast this way. It's really forward-looking, so was that your intention?
It was our intention because we know that President Biden wanted to pick somebody who would be his partner the same way that President Biden as vice president was Barack Obama's partner. That's what he wanted in a vice president, and that's how he chose Kamala Harris. And I think that's the role that she's had, and he's put her on some of the toughest beats in the country. Some of them seem insurmountable, but just the fact that she's on them shows how dedicated the White House is. If you send your vice president, you're telling the whole world, we mean business. So we thought that they are a great team. Mm-hmm. We were inspired by the music video that has Biden and Harris singing about making the country better. They both laugh and sing together, which I thought was fantastic.
CLEO, I love the word art for this episode, which is teamwork, which you painted on a skateboard. And I happen to be a big believer that teamwork really makes all the difference in any endeavor. Throughout this entire season, Georgie and GiGi have made quite a team. And, as we've just been discussing, the same can be said for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And that is, of course, the core of this episode. So what about the idea of teamwork inspires you as an artist in your life? Share that with us.
When you support each other, you balance each other, which also is a little bit of the skateboard theme. Just because this is the holiday season, I'll throw in the fact that, you wouldn't have Santa Claus without Mrs. Claus, or you wouldn't have Rudolph without the rest of his team. You really have to have folks come together to be able to get things accomplished. And just put one more plug in for the voting, which is really, if you think about it, is actually teamwork to basically accomplish a common goal.
That's so well put. Thank you so much. As we head into the new year, what's your hope, each of you, for what 2024 is going to bring? Would you share that with our young listeners, maybe inspire them?
I would just say, think about what world you want to live in and put that into action. Take whatever your passion is and move it forward.
George, what about you?
I'm very hopeful, even in this very difficult time with wars going on overseas and a lot of unhappiness at home. I'm still hopeful that people will participate and that they'll include their children in discussing their vote. And it's almost as if families vote together. Children can be as animated and as knowledgeable as many people who are of age now to vote. I think that even if they can't vote, they can still participate. Kids will understand what's going on in the world much more than we give them credit for. And I think that if we let them participate, that'll make a lot of difference. And maybe that'll make the difference to bringing people together. Perhaps the answer is in talking to our children to find common ground. That's my hope.
Well, thank you, George and CLEO, for those heartfelt answers, for sharing your time with us, for your art and artistry, and for inspiring us all with your words and your art and this podcast. My best wishes to you, my friends, and to all of us for a truly wonderful 2024. Now it's time to catch up with another terrific team, Georgie and GiGi. With that in mind, let's listen as Stephen takes us into the White House, where Georgie and GiGi will come face to face with President Biden and Vice President Harris.
The next time Georgie and GiGi got to meet the president, it wasn't part of their summertime skateboard adventure. They were now officially fifth graders, and their class field trip would be to a place they had already visited a few times, the White House. In the middle of this White House tour, the guide informed their class that President Biden and Vice President Harris would like to take some time out of their day to meet the children. Soon after, the 46th president, Joe Biden, walked in with his vice president, Kamala Harris, by his side. Georgie and GiGi and their classmates could barely contain their excitement. Even their teachers were excited. "Hello there, children," President Biden said warmly. "Hi, everybody," added Vice President Harris, waving both her hands in the air. The president and vice president were very friendly and offered to answer any questions the children had. One of Georgie and GiGi's classmates asked Biden if he liked being president or vice president better. The president answered, "Look, I served as vice president in the Obama administration with my good friend Barack, and we made a lot of progress in those 8 years. But here's the deal. It's not about looking back at what's behind you. It's about looking ahead at what's in front of you. And folks, we've got a lot of work to do, because there's a lot at stake. Nothing less than the very soul of a nation, our nation. So that's why, as president, I keep fighting. For your generation, and the one after that, and so on. That's the work of the Biden administration." "The Biden-Harris administration," the vice president chimed in. One of Georgie and GiGi's classmates then asked Harris what it felt like to be the first female vice president. "It feels great," she said with a laugh. "But honestly, I may be the first woman in this office, but I will certainly not be the last. And you know, we have still not had a woman president in this country." "Not yet," added Biden. Then the children were treated to short one-on-ones with the president and vice president, where they got to personally meet them and have their picture taken with them. Georgie and GiGi asked their teacher if they could ask to meet the president and vice president together and have double the amount of time with them. Their teacher said okay. After posing for a picture with President Biden and Vice President Harris, Georgie and GiGi told them that they probably knew a lot more about presidential history than typical kids. Biden and Harris seemed delighted to hear this and encouraged them to share their knowledge. The two G's proceeded to tell them that George Washington was all about truth. Lincoln taught them that freedom and equality were worth fighting for. And Theodore Roosevelt showed them how important it was to protect and conserve the country's natural resources. "The teddy bear was named after him," exclaimed GiGi. Both Biden and Harris chuckled. They continued. FDR emboldened them to be fearless, especially when doing the right thing. JFK led by example. Being brave and kind were cool. And LBJ schooled them on the terrible nature of discrimination and prejudice. They even learned from Nixon that haters only end up destroying themselves. "He's really not a very good singer," Georgie added. Biden and Harris didn't quite know what to make of that one. And we learned that even though Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton and Donald Trump were officially impeached, they were all allowed to stay on as president because Georgie and GiGi sang, "The House voted to indict, but the Senate said no, it's all right." "Oh, that's clever, children," said Harris. From Carter, they learned how important it is to help people. And from Reagan, they learned how important it is to forgive people. Obama, in addition to being really good on a skateboard, helped them realize that with hope, anything is possible, especially in America. President Biden and Vice President Harris were dazzled by how knowledgeable Georgie and GiGi seemed to be about presidential history. "You know, Kamala," Biden said, "we may just have a future president and vice president on our hands here." "Yeah," giggled GiGi. "Georgie would make a great vice president." At the skate park later that night, Georgie and GiGi were still on cloud 9. Not only had they gotten the chance to visit the White House, again, but they had also impressed the President and Vice President of the United States. "And we only shared with them some of what we learned," boasted Georgie. "Hey, G," he continued, "can you give me a push? It feels like one of my wheels is stuck." "Sure, G," she answered. GiGi hopped off her board and gave Georgie a soft push, and just like that, they were flying.
satisfying ending to this season of The Social Contract. I must say, I'm intrigued to find out where Georgie and GiGi's magical skateboard will take them in Season 3. This time of year always makes me feel a tremendous amount of gratitude. One of the things we all are most grateful for is you. You kiddos are the inspiration for Georgie and GiGi. You are the reason for the books, for this podcast, all of it. So on behalf of myself, our co-creators, George and the artist CLEO, and our entire team, thank you. We wish all the kids, all around the world, a safe, magical, and wonderful holiday. We'll see you back here for Season 3. And to George and CLEO, thank you again for creating this podcast. It really is the gift that keeps on giving. This brings us to the conclusion of Season 2 of The Social Contract. The Social Contract podcast is created by George S. Corey and CLEO, produced and hosted by Tavia Gilbert. Music courtesy of Listen Audio. Mix and master by Kayla Elrod. Additional dialogue editing by Kathleen Conti and Brian Wilson. Production coordinator for TalkBox, Brian Wilson. Social manager Suzette Burton. Production supervisor Tatiana St. Fard. This has been a podcast from Listen Audio in association with TalkBox Productions. On behalf of George, CLEO, Maya, Stephen, and me, Tavia, thank you for listening, and Happy New Year.